Hello and welcome to this Brexit special presented by me, Evan Lucas, for FP Markets. As always, please have a very good read through of the disclaimer on screen. Everything in this video is general in nature. None of it should be taken as any form of personal advice. FP Markets does not know your personal scenario, nor your personal financial goals, and therefore nothing in this video should be relied upon as any form of advice. It is just general in nature only. Let's have a look at the Brexit special. I really want to talk around how to actually possibly and tactically trade through this. Clearly, the pound is the way to look at it, and I'll go through sort of the events and the dates that you really need to be aware of that are coming up that really will push things around. The events are key, and the core mandates around them are also very interesting, and that's why, realistically, you need to have a very good understanding and a very good eye on what goes on in Westminster over the next month. And this month is absolutely critical. It's probably at its highest and most important peak since the June 2016 vote on whether or not the UK should leave the European Union. Very quickly, just want to quantify what Brexit is and why it's such a mess. Brexit was a binary question, yes or no, should the UK leave the European Union. The caveat to that is that this is one of the most multi-dimensional, multifaceted, multi-political issues that could have been put out there. Was the UK leaving the single market? Was it voting to leave the issues around having the Westminster system over the system used in Brussels? Or was it just around immigration? Was it a combination, some, part, all, or other parts of those current questions put out there as well? Probably. But in the end, they had a binary question, yes or no, just to leave the European Union. And so we're in this mess. Not only that, it's become incredibly political. We know that already. We've seen David Cameron lose his job at the time, and Theresa May, since she's had the PM job, has had basically, let's be honest, a poison chalice. And what happens with her, what happens with her government and the Tory outcome is clearly going to be the way you look at this event and how you trade. So first thing to have a look at, and to give you a bit of a benchmark, let's have a look at what happened in the third week of November. This is the chart of looking at cable and the 3 days between when the draft withdrawal agreement from Brussels was put upon. And you can see very clearly the timeline there is quite interesting. So we can see the draft of withdrawal was put there. You then saw some squabbling between pro and Brexiteers. Then you actually saw the draft proposal being accepted by the cabinet. And then you saw Dominic Raab resign. And you can see that is quite a volatile period, and it's why at the moment the pound, particularly against euro sterling and particularly in cable, is at some of its highest level of implied volatilities we've seen in the post-Brexit world. So first off, a no confidence vote in Prime Minister May's current leadership. It looks unlikely now that we've actually got past what we saw with regards to the withdrawal agreement being put forward. It peaked out on that third weekend in November, and I think if you were going to have it happen, it would have happened then. To really see that happen, you would have had to have seen 48 letters actually tendered in, and then you would have needed 111 additional Tory MPs, bringing it up to 159 to actually oust her. That looks very unlikely now. So for that perspective, it's actually probably taken a little bit of heat out of the short side, particularly in cable. And for that reason, there is a bit of a bias to be a little bit long on the pound. And I think for that reason, if you do hear talk around possible spills, it's unlikely. Let's also be honest. If she was to be ousted and then we actually saw some form of change of PM, the current possibilities of who that could be are fairly evenly spread between around 3 candidates, and there isn't any sort of major consensus that would get you into sort of falling into who that could be. It's a poison chalice to hold it. If they have some form of long-term leadership ambitions, it's not the right time to do it. And from my view, I actually think that most likely, if there is going to be a spill, it'll be probably post the whole Brexit issue, which basically is April next year. She will be challenged, and in my view, she'll be ousted. So for now, it's not the way to look at it, not the way to play. If you do hear it, I think there is a slight, probably long call and a long bias to be, again, in cable or euro sterling. The next part of it, and this is probably the main whole idea of this, is the parliamentary vote. The parliamentary vote at the moment isn't scheduled yet, but we do have a date range. It's between December 10th and December 18th. In my view, this is the most important part of this entire play out, because at the moment, the probability, or at least even a chance of seeing the withdrawal agreement agreed upon by the Commons is razor thin. The numbers are so slight in terms of what she needs to get to. She needs 320 sitting MPs to vote on it. Now, let's work through with what we've got so far. The DUP is the one to watch here. They've been pretty strong in their views. They're not exactly impressed with what's going on in the Irish border issue. They've also seen some other issues they don't like. And so far, they have publicly said anyway that they won't support the deal. Now, if we take that as fact, therefore take them out, it would mean every single Tory MP plus 4 others, so that's Lib Dems, Labor, and any other form of other party, Greens, etc., would have to vote with it to have it passed in its current format. That looks unlikely. Now, let's also put out there, it's most likely the PM will put her whips out. She'll probably very clearly get some form of doomsday sort of predictions out there if no vote is done. She'll pull the DUP in, and probably some of her mongering issues in her Tory party. But even so, let's also take the idea that 25 Conservative MPs have clearly put out there that they don't support her leadership, don't support this deal, and therefore if you take them out, she's going to have to find 19 other MPs to get it through. The conclusion out of this, it will fail on the first attempt. I think that has to be probably your way to look at it, and probably your first scenario on this output. So that, in my view, is the big risk. So that's a short pound opportunity, and a short pound probably movement. It's going to have a huge volatile effect. So I think there is ways to look at that as well. And from my point of view, I think you want to be out of any long biases by the end, or even probably the start of December, or the end of the first week of December. That's how I would look at it and go from there. The 2 final things I really want to talk about are the 2 most loved market dulling topics, but personally I think have either no probability or a very, very slight chance. The no probability is a general election. Getting back to, again, the numbers that's going in there, there is suggestions that a general election could happen. I think it's impossible because politicians support politicians. And the reason I say that very clearly, you actually need 2/3 of the House to vote in favour of doing this. That would mean over 100 Tory MPs would have to actually vote against the current Prime Minister, vote for a general election, at the risk of being ousted of power and at the risk of having, in their view, the scorched earth idea of a Corbyn-led government. The market also very much loves discussing what a Corbyn-led government would do. So all of that plays into my theory that there is no way a general election will be called out of this event. It will happen sometime in the future, clearly, but it won't happen around this whole month. And for that reason, if you do hear any talk about it, again, a long bias and probably the pound is the option because it's just so unlikely and, in my view, actually improbable. The one that is slightly more probable, it's still a long way away, is a second referendum. I reckon it's actually only about a 10% chance. However, we can't argue and can't deny the fact that I believe that that parliamentary vote will cause panic. It will create market turmoil, and therefore invariably you'll get some form of talk around a second referendum and giving the people the chance to actually recast their vote on that binary outcome. What you've got to conclude from that, though, is that that would be a huge democratic and political carnage issue, and therefore it seems very unlikely. So the panic would be a step towards the idea of a second referendum, but there would be several more needed to get there. In fact, a worsening scenario would have to happen to actually sort of even consider it. So again, that's a sort of a slightly longer pound play on the overall. So 3 in favour, 1 against. It also has a time frame to this. So if we look at it from that point of view and take now as the actual start point, I therefore have a slightly long bias with regards to the pound, all the way up to, as I said, the announcement of when the parliamentary vote will happen. Then want to back away and probably actually either be out or be slightly short leading into the parliamentary vote, because I think, as I said, that first one is going to fail. It will create quite large volatility and it will create some market panic. With that in mind, I therefore also am looking at probably taking some small parcels and adding to them if it happens. But in conclusion, out of all of that, it is clear this month is huge. It is clear that Brexit is incredibly messy, and what is even more clear is that out of all of this, nobody will come untarnished, and Prime Minister May will have an incredibly hard task of holding her job come April.